Welcome back to the OPEX podcast. Today's guest is Daniel Davey, who is a sports performance nutritionist with the Dublin Senior Footballers and Leinster Rugby. On this episode, Daniel and I discuss nutrition for elite sports performance. As always, guys, it was a great conversation. I know you're going to love it. Stay with us. Okay, Daniel, thank you so much for making time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. It's great to be here.
So, like any podcast, they usually start off with backgrounds. So, fill us in.
Okay. It's as time has gone on, it's amazing how much it's expanded. Because again, not to get too philosophical, but I realize the relevance of all of the influences. So I'm from a farming background in the west of Ireland, where my food value started. So I'm from Sligo, small little. There's 7 people. I think there's now 10 people in a place called Chaffpool. Grandparents and parents were all farmers, beef and dairy. So went on from there. Obviously went through school, studied ag science in UCD was my science degree, but I picked up as many of the food science modules as I could and the chemistry modules as I could to go on and study and do a master's in nutrition, CSCS, exercise and health studies, and then I've been working in the sports nutrition industry since 2008, 2009, mainly in team sport, but more recently I've been doing my own nutrition clinic with some different members of the population, but I'm still finding that it's elite athletes or high-end or very committed athletes that are coming through the door.
All right, great stuff. So next question I'm going to ask you about is your influences. So in terms of your biggest influences, not only professionally, but personally, who would you say have been some of the biggest ones?
That list has massively expanded over time, because again, it starts with your grandmother and your parents, particularly my father, and he always had an interest in how things worked, health. Then in school, it was very fortunate from my best friend, or one of my closest friends, is Brendan Egan. We did a lot of general chit chat around football, first of all in school, and then he went on to study sports nutrition and sports science out of college, or in college, and then I started hearing about his path and realized that was the path that I wanted to go. And then it was people like it changes, like so from a nutrition and from a science point of view, my soundboard has always been Brendan. And then from a relationship point of view, it was someone like Martin Kennedy, who is a really good coach that I worked with. And as time has gone on, then it's, you're exposed to people who are very, very high achievers and who are excellent at creating a vision or understanding of what a legacy looks like. And that's people like Leo Cullen, Jim Gavin and Stuart Lancaster. And you continue to learn from those type of people all the time. So, I could probably continue, but they're some of the main personalities and people within my life that from a science point of view, from a coaching point of view, from a relationship building point of view, that have had massive influence.
I can definitely attest to Brendan. Anyway, I know you and Brendan are more so mates, and I'd say at this stage now in our relationship, we're probably more mates as well. But initially, he started off as a massive mentor. Now, I'd still consider him a mentor because, my longer term ambition currently is to, PhD and get into research. And Brendan's background is just phenomenal. It's funny because whenever I talk about Brendan to people who don't know him, I'm just like, okay, I got to give you the background, right? This guy's a winner. Okay, he's a winner. He's played senior and county football for Sligo, undergrad, masters, PhD, postdoc. He did all that shit around the world, like in Sweden and America, while he still played county football. All-Ireland club titles with Vincent, wife, kids, and then he's like basically
the most amazing father you'll come across because how he allocates his time.
Unbelievable, and he basically runs a whole sports science and a whole sports science department, and he's not even 40 yet. Like, do you know what I mean?
I know.
And he's in great shape, and he's always happy.
I know, and he's a good-looking bastard, and he dresses well. He actually did his leaving cert when he was 16 as well. Yeah, yeah. He got what he wanted to do. He knew what he wanted to do, and he was, there's certain people in life that you come across that are, how would you say it? They're incredibly driven to what they want to achieve, and that normally, I mean, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. They're very, very single-minded in what they want to achieve, and that makes them incredibly selfish. Whereas Brendan, he is one of the most reliable people you could possibly ever meet.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique quality. And, I often mention that quality as high up as his, as his other achievements. But you go through life then measuring other people by it, and, that can be a very difficult measurement stick.
Yeah, he's over now with Ken Ford in Florida.
I know.
That's
I got
great
some photos from him actually only yesterday. So he said it's a great opportunity, and you know what? He's going to be a big success over there too because of his skill set and his experience.
Big time. So just actually before I hop into asking about sort of your philosophy when it comes to nutrition, and then your principles and systems that you utilize within nutrition, performance nutrition. What made you get into nutrition? Okay, so you gave the background, came from the West, you're from Sligo, farming background. Like, when was it that you were kind of like, yeah, nutrition's what I want to get into?
Okay, there's a couple of parts to that. Again, I don't want to go into any great detail on it, but I think the reason why I mentioned these type of things is because I'm now regularly asked from people about career paths and nutrition, and I think these are the type of things that people need to ask themselves. What are the things that really interest you, and what are the things that will keep you going in that specific direction, even when things are really tough. So, I was asking at the age of 6 or 7, I was asking my grandmother about what I should be eating. I was looking at the guys in the local football team who were performing at their best, and I wanted to know what they were eating. And like, I was asking my grandmother to go and find out and speak to their mothers and stuff like that. So it started very, very young. I was always interested in how exercise and food impacted the human body. And that went on and on and on. And to be honest with you, the only reason, there was a couple of things that I wanted to do when I was growing up. I wanted to be a vet, or I wanted to be a doctor. And I didn't have enough interest in school to achieve the points. So what happened was I just closed off all of those areas, and I didn't do well in school. I like, very, very few people know this, but I actually even failed maths in my Leaving Cert because I didn't even have a maths book. And I went back, I did the maths exam, and I had to get a recheck and got into university. And then education is actually really cool when you're studying and learning about things that you want to learn about. And the science degree that I had in UCD was exceptional because it gave me enough of there was enough modules in things like nutrition, in things like food science, where I just thought, this is what I need to know more about. So it wasn't until I was in my first year in college, and it all went from there. And I did everything from pretty much day one in college to put me in the direction of becoming a sports nutritionist.
Yeah, listen, just so you know, I'm in the school club too. I didn't even do my junior cert.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, didn't even do junior cert. So I didn't, like I said it, but didn't pass it or anything. Like, basically just sit there. Listen, ancient history, as you say, but yeah, I suppose if I...
Still relevant because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people don't realize there's so many different avenues. And I think for any young people, whether it be food, nutrition, health, whatever it might be, physio, I think it's important that people know that if you're really sure that's what you want to do, and this is the caveat, and I think out of, let's say I've spoken to 50 young nutritionists, this is the question I always ask them. I say, are you interested in doing nutrition for your own interest in nutrition or helping other people with it? Because they're two very, very different things. And the 2 or 3 people who have gone on and done extremely well in nutrition, they gave me the right answers. So it's very specific to you wanting to learn about it so that you can help others. And that's what I mean. I was always interested. First, I mean, it starts with your own interest, but then I really genuinely want to help people improve their nutrition behavior.
Yeah, yeah. Just for the international listeners, like essentially, like if you're American, so if we're talking high school, I probably would have dropped out as a freshman. That probably been freshman, yeah. I had 3 years left because I goes freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Yeah, I didn't finish the last 3 years of high school basically, and then Dan saying he didn't pass maths to get his high school degree. Essentially, just for any international listeners. And look at us now.
Well, we're just still on the journey, aren't we? It's not that we've done anything yet, but
Exactly.
we're a little bit further along.
Exactly. You took the words right out. It's just a journey. So you work with, like I was going to say, potentially, not even potentially, they are. You work with two of the most successful sports teams of not only just like currently, but they'll go down as some of the two best sports teams in their respective sports of all time. So Dublin senior footballers who are currently chasing their 5th All-Ireland senior football title in a row, which has never happened, just for any of the international listeners. And like they're without question they're the best team in the country now, and they'll go down as one of the greatest teams of all time in the history of Gaelic football. And you're also working with Leinster Rugby, who will also go down as one of the greatest rugby teams in club rugby of all time. And you are the sports performance nutritionist to these two teams. So maybe talk about your role with these two teams, and then after that we can start talking maybe about like what's your overarching philosophy when it comes to performance nutrition, and then wrapped sort of in that is what's your system that you abide by to try and apply your philosophy, which is basically going to be your nutritional principles. But what is it like to work with Dublin senior footballers and Leinster Rugby? What's your role there?
Well, I guess to start off, it was a dream come true. That's all I ever wanted to do, and I guess the amazing thing is that that's all I ever wanted to do. But then it wasn't exactly how I expected it would be, and it's something that when you go into these environments, it takes a period of adjustment, because it's not just about the information that you know. It's about I guess I use this a lot, but it's about the forming of the relationships and forming of the trust, and that takes a lot of time, and that was very difficult to get my head around in the early stages. I had confidence in my ability to execute really, really good nutrition practice and strategies, and when I started to, I guess, experience the barriers of those cultures, it took a little bit of a time to get used to it and realize that it doesn't just come easy. Buy-in doesn't come easy, and adherence doesn't come easy, and you have to be incredibly patient. So it was a steep learning curve. It was a very steep learning curve, and it was absolutely exhilarating because it didn't come easy. It's like anything. When you realize it's hard, you've got a couple of options. You can find solutions, or you can go, this is not for me. And I worked hard to find solutions, and that meant building relationships with the right people, and over time figuring out that people are very, very different, and that once you understand that and you can become comfortable with that, then you know that when the opportunities present themselves, that you execute them really well. So that's what's it like. It's very, very different now to where it started. The culture of nutrition has been built on a very strong foundation over the past. I started at the end of 2012, believe it or not, in the same environments within 6 work weeks of each other, and I guess it's probably it wouldn't be unusual to say, or it would be fair to say that it came a little bit easier in the GAA environment. It's an amateur environment, and I'm from a GAA background myself, so I was a little bit more familiar with the culture. Whereas you do have to earn your crust a little bit more in a professional environment, and there's an awful lot more pressure. There's an awful lot more measurement. There's a lot more accountability as a practitioner. And I guess it probably took at least 2 years to build very strong cultural foundations. But I guess we were talking a little bit earlier about what comes first. I wouldn't change anything about the approach that I took, and that was very much on understanding the importance of good food and giving people the skills to prepare nutritious, tasty, healthy food. And then the actual layers of education and strategy and pinpointing things with great accuracy, whether it be about specific grams of a nutrient or the timing of a nutrient, that's still evolving, in 2019, 6-7 years later.
Great stuff. So if I was to ask you what's your nutritional philosophy, how would you answer
that? How would I answer it? I always go off the hierarchy of needs when I'm dealing with any athlete, and it's understanding energy, and that we require sufficient energy to execute whatever daily activities that we're doing, whether it be physical or mental. But I guess I'm going to actually take a step back and say it is about having the skills and the knowledge to execute or to eat the right foods in the right proportions and quantity, to allow people to perform at their best and be healthy. And I do that differently with every single person. It's very simple or it's very complex, dependent on the personality. I try and bring as much fun and enjoyment and pleasure to the area of nutrition as I can.
Great stuff, yeah. And then, so how do you go about implementing that? So that's kind of your philosophy in terms of principles. I think you were kind of touching on that there in terms of like the hierarchy of order, but
yeah, I think that's more to do with the principles.
Principles, yeah. If you want to get into that, then you can.
Yeah, so it's about, I guess, like I explained, it's energy and then it's macronutrients. And my principles around macronutrients are very, very consistent. It's the protein doesn't change. We have an equal amount of protein distributed across the day in a minimum of 4 portions. Fat varies quite significantly, dependent on the level of exercise intensity and the type of exercise a person does on any given day. It could be as much as 40-45% of energy intake, depending on the type of activity. Obviously, a greater proportion of fat on days of rest or recovery. And then carbohydrate is the nutrient that is used for priming performance and executing drills and activities at high intensity. And that nutrient, the approach is carbohydrate cycling, but I do it in a very, very simplistic form, where it is a higher intake of carbohydrate on active days, or days where the guys are training, and a lower intake on days where they're not active. The ranges of carbohydrate will be somewhere between 3 grams per kg body mass and 8 to 9 grams of carbohydrate per kg body mass. And I don't even get the guys to do any huge assessment on that. Once a year they'll do a week or 2 weeks just to review their own nutrition and see where it's at. But most of my templates around my meal plans and my recipes will provide a clear indication of what that looks in food terms. So then it comes, I look, that's an element of nutrient timing in there, but then nutrient timing, there's been an awful lot discussed around nutrient timing. It's probably one of the things that was initially a huge buzzword in nutrition, and now not so much. But when it comes to elite athletes who are training as much as 3 times a day, we've just started our preseason, nutrient timing is critical. It's absolutely critical. Of course, less so for a recreational athlete or an athlete who's training 2 to 3 times a week, 1 gym session and 2 or 3 pitch sessions. It's less important. But there's great emphasis on the phases of preparation and the phases of recovery, the 3 phases of preparation, 3 phases of recovery for elite athletes. The last, so I guess I spoke about my philosophy around nutrition, and that's food quality. And what that looks like in simple terms is 7 to 10 portions of fruit and vegetables on any given day, with a greater proportion of vegetables, as much variety as I can, and trying to communicate and make it very, very tangible for people on why quality matters so much. So, like the most recent way that I'll communicate about the importance of variety or nutrients or quality is on gut health. And again, because there's so much talk about it, that's very tangible for athletes. But where it all started was the antioxidant profile of food. Again, it's funny, like the antioxidants value of food, again, is something that's been hugely controversial within sport, but I just keep it to a focus on health, and optimum health and optimum recovery, without going into any focusing specifically on antioxidants based supplements.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. On just the last tiny piece, the 3 to 5% is supplementation, and that's a very narrow, very small number of supplements, because again, the same theme right throughout. It's the application and consistency, because you can't have a wide range of supplements, because then the consistency in application drops very, very quickly.
What's your strategy for guys who either need to eat a lot of calories to hold on to weight, or are eating to put on weight, and it's just very hard to get it all through solid quality food? Like, is that a case of, yeah, now we do need to get some calories in through, if we were taught, and this is the key thing too, isn't it? Are we talking health, performance, hypertrophy, or fat loss? Like when I used to teach at a personal training college, I used to say to the students, listen, I think you're eating for 4 things. You're either eating to lose body fat, to put on muscle, for sports performance, or for health and wellness. And ideally, you don't want to take a strategy from one of those 4 categories and put it to another one of those categories. So the example I always used to give was when the paleo diet got really popular in CrossFit, like the classical paleo diet, like the low carb one. Now, like obviously there's paleo versions that you can take in more carbs through starch and whatnot, but like the classic low carb one, and they were all low carb, and all these fucking CrossFitters were like dying, like, and saying they had adrenal fatigue. Well, we can have the whole debate if that even exists, but they were all fucked basically, you know what I mean? It's because they were taking a strategy that was designed really for longevity and health, and not for like ideal performance and anaerobic activity. Now I know there's aerobic activities in CrossFit, but they do so many anaerobic activities as well. But sorry, my original question is, when you someone looking to either gain weight, or someone that has to eat a lot just to hold on to their weight because they just for their position maybe on a team, what are your strategies there? Because again, I'd be similar to you. Ideally, we do want to use whole food, but is that where, like, listen, this is where this guy, it's okay for him to eat quote unquote not so healthy? And the example I'll give, and you probably saw this too, remember that documentary that came out about Tommy Bowe, and everyone saw him eating the biscuits, and everyone's like, oh, it's healthy to eat biscuits. Like, no, it's not. You have to eat that to hold on to weight, you man thing, or to gain the weight. So just your strategy of holding on to weight or weight gain in terms of getting those calories in.
Okay, that's very relevant, because what I am seeing most commonly at this moment in time is the athletes who are struggling to hold weight are actually the guys who you consider the most healthy. So it's guys who are predominantly plant-based, or pescatarians, or vegetarians, or who don't eat an awful lot of red meat, and their calorie intake has massively suffered. So it's interesting you should ask that question, because you're right. Again, we're not going into the debate around sugar, but because there's so much information in the media about the damaging effects of sugar for our risk of various lifestyle-related diseases, that muddies the water. And you will find that athletes are, they don't understand the bottom the bottom of the pyramid being calories in, and they don't understand that if they don't get enough calories, that's actually significantly going to impede their performance and increase their risk of injury. So at the moment, it's interesting you mentioned the whole biscuits thing. I don't tend, there's all levels. It comes back to the relationship, because I did use what you would consider processed food. So let's say, for example, I would have athletes that would really have high calorie needs, maybe 5,000 calories, 4,500 calories. I'm massively struggling eating 8 meals a day, but the density of calories was always too low. So I would suggest something like Lucozade Energy during their gym sessions, and like, that's pure sugar, and I'm like, I know, but it's a very easy way to get in a high amount of carbohydrate, which you're utilizing even during those high intensity gym sessions. So very quickly I realized they just wouldn't do it. They just wouldn't drink it because of their belief system.
Yeah.
So I then would change, like, none of them are probably going to listen to this, so it doesn't make much difference. But I would change it to grape juice or apple juice. And then they'd be like, oh, no, I'll do that, no problem. But they consume exactly the same amount of calories, or maybe more calories from the fruit juice. But the perception of it was, well, that's okay because that's healthy. That's a fruit juice.
Yeah.
So it's all about degrees. It's all about the way you communicate something and keeping things within reason as healthy. I mean, I still wouldn't be able to. There's none of my athletes that I work with, none of them that would willingly eat a packet of biscuits to hit their calorie needs. So unless like it was some sort of granola biscuit or a homemade biscuit, then they would.
It's gas, isn't it? It really is.
It is gas. It is gas.
Yeah. So something you mentioned there was that on training days they'll have more carbohydrate, on non-training days they may not. I've heard some people say though, like, it's the non-training day that they'll get into carb load for the training day the following day, and actually post-training, if they're not training till, if they don't have like a very high intensity training session for another maybe day or 48 hours after a high intensity session, that they don't need to be getting the carbohydrate straight in immediately after that. So some people say it maybe nearly should be the off day that they're carb loading for the training day to come, and then actually on the training day itself you could actually be a little more on your carbohydrate post session, because you might have a 36 hour or 48 hour window there for your next one. No, so just thoughts on that, like.
Yeah, like, it's entirely dependent on which days are your big days.
Yeah.
So there's loads of times throughout the season where an athlete will consume high intakes of carbohydrate. And I'm talking about high intakes. We're not talking about the Tour de France here.
Yeah,
like, the Tour de France athletes could be consuming between 12 and 18 grams of carbs a day. We're talking about 6 grams of carbohydrate, which is moderate in terms of the I mean, it's large because of their body weights. That's the only reason it's large. But in reference to the level of activity they're doing, what they need, that level of carbohydrate for recovery, for performance, and for meeting their calorie needs. So it's very, very specific. I'm just giving you a broad outline of right, here's an average training week where we're doing 2 high intensity days, 2 moderate intensity days, and then you've got a recovery day. So that's just, it's very, very much dependent on the schedule. I've loads. I've got some. My eyes are really, really opened when I started working with endurance athletes, and I saw the volume of work they were doing, and I just thought to myself, "Oh my God, I'm like, the team sport athletes do nothing, in comparison to what you've got." Athletes who are doing, like, they do 10 miles in the morning, they might do something light, which they would consider light in the early afternoon, and then they're doing, they might do another 2 hours on the bike in the evening, and you're going, oh my God, like, their volume of calories of carbohydrate is very high consistently.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to apply that model that we're talking about.
Yeah, you're just like, what? Why would you want to do that to yourself?
Yeah, but I have seen there's the personality traits. There's quite a significant overlap. They're very resilient. They're they're again, they're a subset of the athlete population. There's not many people that can do or put their bodies through what those athletes do. I admire them, I have to say. No, I have met pretty mad endurance athletes too, but I do admire them as a whole.
So we kind of touched on it a little bit there, but didn't really give it a title. Nutritional periodization, kind of touched on it there. We're talking about, like, you know, different carbohydrate intakes. But I'm sure you're well aware of this. So, like, Graham Close speaks about it. James Morton speaks about it. But, like, I heard him speak about it on Danny's podcast too, and in other places. You know, so this idea of, you know, the you know, train low and then, you know, recover high, like this concept that, you know, you might train in a low carbohydrate state and maybe a higher fat intake, and it was to do, like, with mitochondrial biogenesis. And then as you got closer to the match day, you'd start to carb, and then hopefully that would help then in terms of just being more efficient with energy, and your machinery would be better because you'd have more mitochondria. Maybe you'd be able to utilize it more through the aerobic glycolysis or Krebs cycle. Therefore, you'd be less anaerobic, you'd fatigue later on in the game. That kind of idea. Have you utilized any of those strategies, like with your work with any teams you've been with, in terms of, like, kind of nutritional periodization of, you know, manipulating the carbs, fats, and, you know, with this idea of, like, I know this is the thing where, like, the scientists are like, yeah, geek out, and they're like, I love it, you know, he said mitochondria, oh my god. And then, like, you get the coaches who roll their eyes and are like, for fuck's sake, does that even happen? Like, you know what I mean? But you get what I mean. Like,
I'm right in the middle. I'm right in the middle because I love it, and I love the concept. And when I'm asked, I mean, if you were to ask me about giving some sort of rationale or some evidence for the approach that I'm talking about, that would be one of them that I would mention. I'd say, you know, that has a potential benefit. But when you're talking about athletes in terms of adherence, I mean, it's just,
yeah,
I like, you give them a concept and then they go, oh, that's unbelievable, that sounds fantastic. And then, you know, you adjust their refuel, and their refuel will have a higher percentage of fat and protein, a lower percentage of carbohydrate. And then, like, 20 minutes later, you know, you're in the environment, and, you know, they're snacking on a packet of rice cakes, and, you know, they've got a flavored milk in their hand, and you're going, you know, we had that chat about you know, the carb periodization and train low, and they're like, oh yeah, no, but I was hungry. So
their dopamine system got the better of them.
Yeah, so I love it, and I believe in a lab environment, or with the 1% or the 0.1% of the professional athlete population, particularly the endurance athletes. I mean, I've been to loads of James Morton's presentations.
Yeah,
I've seen what he's achieved with his riders and Team Sky, and I think in those type of environments, it's very, very attainable. And I think as well, there's another environment that it's very achievable, and that is in the environment where food is almost entirely catered for. But you go back to my philosophy. What's my philosophy? My philosophy is based on skills, and it's based on enjoyment. And I would take greater satisfaction and enjoyment in an athlete preparing an incredible risotto or a really tasty chicken pie with potato, and him coming to me and telling me about the spices that he used and how enjoyable it was to eat with his housemates or his family, rather than saying, well, that doesn't fit in and, like, well, on with our strategy, does it? You know, so there's elements of it that I absolutely do use in the train, in the carbohydrate periodization approach, definitely. And there are periods where I believe that it may offer some potential benefits, but how often, how regularly, how consistently, there's absolutely no way you can measure it.
Yeah. Let's get into adherence and behavior change, because I know it's a huge piece that you believe in, and you constantly speak about whenever I've heard conversations with yourself around performance nutrition. And I suppose, like, this is the key thing about nutrition too. Like when we know this, like, it's just not about calories. It's not even just about the food. It's an experience, isn't it? Like, eating is an experience. Like, if you think about, like, you know, the sensory systems in our body, so vision and hearing and like obviously taste. Like your mouth is so intimate to your body, like you're putting something in your system. So like the emotional attachment we have to foods, you know, and obviously smell and taste are so close together. You know, the smell of your grandmother's cooking or your mother's cooking. And like from a nutrition, I know too, Daniel, like I gave nutrition talks as well, like, and you know, and at a cognitive level, everyone can get on board. You can make them understand, but then it's just like, yeah, but in the back of their head, they're like, yeah, but I love my grandmother's home cooked bread, and like I want that, because again, there's a whole, and then you know the whole social aspect, sitting down with a family, and it's just all that. So all that comes into play when it comes to behavioral change and adherence. So I want you to sort of brain dump your thoughts on this.
Oh my God, it's so complex. It's so complex.
Simplify it first.
Yeah, I will.
Wise one.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm going to give you a couple of different aspects of it. The most how would you say, upsetting conversations I've had have been with the people I love the most in relation to nutrition, and you know, people whose health you care about the most, where you're trying to emphatically say, these are the changes that you need to make to live a long, healthy life so we can all be happy together, and they don't buy into them. And it's very, very difficult. And you try every single different type of approach, and it doesn't work. It works for times, it works for periods, and then you realize that the more you push on that, the worse your relationship is. So it's very, very difficult. That's one aspect of it. That's the hardest aspect of it, that you have to give so much of the decision making to another person. Help, support, and educate as best you can, but ultimately people need to find their own way. And the question around behavior change is the one area that I am investing the greatest amount of time and energy in on a personal level, that compared to anything else in my whole practice. And what am I looking at? I'm looking at meditation. I'm looking at mindfulness. I'm looking at the influence of music on when people are cooking. I'm looking at the speed at which people prepare their food at. I'm looking at meal plans. I'm looking at the impact of routine and lifestyle and exercise and the timing of all of them. And it's just such a complex element that I realize, and I'm still, you know, I'm still learning on this, but that you have to be able to make an assessment of where somebody is right at this moment, and give them enough to challenge them, but not too much to undermine what they're doing, or to knock them off a particular path. So I've always found that less is always more. The shorter my meetings are with athletes, generally, the more effective they are. The clearer and the simpler the objectives are, the greater the potential for those to be executed. So I will always start with a new client around something like breakfast. And it's not about getting into the debate on whether people should eat breakfast or not. That's irrelevant. But if you can start somebody's day, whenever they start their day, on a meal that's a positive meal, and if they can develop that and form that as a habit, that has been a very positive and successful way to change behavior. So it's very complex, but the simpler, the smaller the objective. I mean, it's based on the concept, of habit books and books like The Power of Habit. But it's not just that, it's understanding the science of nutrition on top of that. That's just one small.
Yeah, I interviewed a Decaju, and I heard her say in another podcast, and I thought this was just a really profound statement. And yeah, it was one of these things you heard it, and you were like, I know that, but I never heard it stated that way. And someone said to her, like, what's one of the best pieces of advice you could give someone in regards to nutrition? And she said, you're only one meal away from being back on track. Whereas, you know what I mean? Most of us here, you're only one meal away from fucking up. You know, her thing was, her mindset flipped around. She's like, no, you're only one meal away from getting back on track. Like, don't worry about it. It's just like next meal, you're back on track. Boom. Back in the swing of things.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting too, because there's a big movement about at the moment I'm seeing again online about sharing people, you know, their personal stories and their relationships with food. I never ever would have considered my approach to food or to nutrition to be unhealthy. I would never have approached it. I think I was incredibly single-minded, and that was often misplaced. So, I mean, I would have gone for maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years without eating any bad food, and not really thinking anything of it because I was getting my pleasure in other places, but also not properly appreciating either that the odd bad meal doesn't make a bit of difference. So as time has gone on, my relationship with food has absolutely changed. There's no question. I mean, I've been on holidays over the last 3 weeks. It was bad meal, good meal, bad meal, good meal, and plenty of alcohol in between. But it's about developing that relationship with food. But the key thing is understanding, and this is the difficult part. This is like the space that I feel very privileged to be in, is that I am always in control. Mm-hmm. If I have a bad meal now, it never ever affects me. It never affects me physically. It never affects me mentally, because my needle is always coming back to the center.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to achieve when I'm working with any athletes, so that their dial is always pointing in the right direction, and helping them to understand that, again, an odd bad meal is relevant, but putting them back to back to back, that is going to be a problem.
Yeah. Like, the analogy I use is like when you play a match, you lose a match, you're not like, oh, that's it, I quit. It's like, next game, and in the next game you win, you feel, oh yeah, we lost last week, we won this week. But like, again, if you lost game after game after game, it's like, we're getting relegated here. You know, so it's similar with meals. Like, it's grand, chill out. But like, and that comes from, like you, Dan, the same. Like, if I had a bad meal years ago, I was like, oh my god. I suppose we need to give context what bad food is, but I think most people get what we're saying. Food that's, you know, processed. It isn't, you know, isn't coming from Mother Nature. Or we could go down that whole rabbit hole as well.
Well, I guess it is worth mentioning that what I still probably, other people probably wouldn't categorize the meals that I eat for enjoyment as really bad meals. I mean, I am talking about eating pizza and, you know, like very, very, very high calorie foods. That's probably a better kind of way of explaining
it. Yeah. I get you.
But I mean, that brings me enormous pleasure.
And again, listen, if there's a social context around friends, family, conversation. So, like, this is a conversation I had with Danny too about like how, like, what is true health? Because like, there's so many aspects that make the spokes of that wheel, you know? So like, for instance, all right, let's say you're going to go out with your mates. And it's like, right, is that healthy from a circadian biology standpoint? No, you're going to be out late around artificial light, blah, blah, blah. Is it healthy from a social aspect? Yes. Then it's like, how much do they counterbalance or counteract each other? Or, you know, okay, eating like the new research out now around circadian timing of meals, like the more research, they're kind of saying, yeah, you probably should eat the majority of your meals in daylight, in the active period, not do it too close to bedtime at night. It's like, you tell somebody that in Greece and Italy, they'll be like, get the boat. They're like, we eat at 9 p.m. and it's a family time. Like, it's like, do you know what I mean? So what is the social aspect with them around the family? And the fact is they kind of don't eat during the day either. That's another confounding factor. It's like, what if I fasted all day and was really active? You know, how much does that confound the metabolic processes, you know, stuff like that? There's just so many, you know, contextual things that go into so many questions.
Yeah, for sure. But I think in each one of those, like, very simple examples that you gave, I think if I was to make an assessment on it, I think you can categorize them all as healthy as long as in each one of those scenarios people are coming back to that point. By the way, I'm trying to remove the word balance from my vocabulary. I hate it so
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
But it is about understanding that I use radar a lot instead. Is your radar on point? You know, are you on target here? But that just simply means that, you know, that family in Spain, they mightn't have eaten for 6 hours. They might have been out walking. They might have been watering the flowers or digging the garden or whatever it
yeah,
may be. But I mean, I've actually over the last, particularly over the last 5 years, you know, I've been to a lot of the Mediterranean countries, and whether it be Spain, Portugal, or Italy, or France, or wherever, the one thing that I'm seeing over and over and over and over is not that the food quality is that much better. It's the culture around how they eat
yes,
and how they drink.
yeah,
So my like one of the most incredible experiences, food experiences I had was in Parma last year, and I was taken up on. I did this incredible bike tour. By the way, I mean it's worth doing. It's called the Bike Food Stories bike tour. So they take you around to all the local farmers and like there's even little distilleries and people who make cakes and all this kind of stuff. So you spend the day cycling around to all of these different places. I was absolutely pissed out of my mind by the end of it, but it was brilliant. And the thing that I noticed is each one of them, the portion sizes were so much smaller. I mean, the tortellini and the pasta dishes, I was looking at them going, there's obviously 5 or 6 of these coming. But no, it was one portion. If you wanted, you could have another portion. But the time taken to eat and drink and the portions were completely different to what I
yeah.
was brought up with. That's the
Yeah.
single biggest difference.
That actually segues perfectly into this question, which is food hygiene. So, you know, as in sitting, and this is something I personally do. This is just me. My mealtime is the time I give gratitude. Like every time I sit down at a meal, this is what I always do. I look up, I pick a point. It's usually like the light bulb I look at, and I always just say, thank you so much. Just whatever I'm thanking, higher power, whatever. And then I'll hold the meal in my hands and I'll look at the meal and I'd say, I am so grateful for this meal right now. And I always say that. And usually for some reason, I have a friend, right? And I don't know what, this always comes to my head. He has this thing, like when you ask him a question, like, you know, how you do, whatever, or ask him to do something, a favor. And he goes, yes, sir, yes, sir. He does that, like, as I always go, I'm so grateful for my life. And then that just goes, yes, sir, yes, sir. I don't know why. But I always just give gratitude for every meal. For every meal. I've been doing that, like, I was say religiously. I'm not religious, but I've been doing that like as a consistent theme, if you like, for the last, I don't know, couple years, 3 years, whatever. And I just find, because it slows the process. It's kind of like it's a little primer to say, right, slow down.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I was like my dad used to say, he's like, Rob, your food is not running off the table. Relax.
Yeah.
Do you know that kind of way? So
Yeah.
sorry, I'm rambling here, but food hygiene, like, so in terms of, like, you know, sitting down, taking your time, like James Fitzgerald from OPEX, he's like, chew it 40 times. And he's, you know, he kind of says that tongue in cheek, like 40 times. He's like, if I can get people to chew it 23 times, because like they aim for 40, he's like, that's better. But actually chew your food, breathe. Because again, it's funny too, like, I don't know about you, but like I'd be saying to people, if you're drinking loads of water at your meal, that's telling me you're eating too fast, like, because you're having to wash it down. Obviously, you don't want to dilute your stomach acid and try and have your water in between your meals, kind of thing. But yeah, food hygiene, you know, slowing it down, chewing it, enjoying it, using your tongue, not eating when you're stressed out or on the go. And what are your thoughts on that? Or do you discuss this now with people?
Well, that's a great question. And it's not a question I've been asked before. And if I'm being really honest with you, there's not that many people I could probably even have that conversation with, because what I try and, we're talking about a lot of my athletes, what I try to get them to do is cook and prepare food. And the more I can get them to do that, the better. Moving into the experience, that's trying to create this sense that this is a very positive experience.
Yeah.
Now, I have built my entire, let's say my, you know, the whole social media platform and things like that. I've based it on speed, taste and speed of healthy food. And it's funny. I was at I was in Seville 2 weeks ago, and I went to a Pela, whatever way you want to pronounce it. But it was a real, how would you say it, step back and take this all in moment, because I realized that for the last whatever 5 or 6 years, what I've been doing is I've been trying to speed up the process,
Yeah.
whereas they're constantly trying to not just slow. It's not just about slowing down the process, but it's about trying to improve your process all the time. But time is not the issue. You give it the time that's needed to create your piece of art. You don't rush your paintings. You don't anything that you do or that you do well. You don't rush it, and you give it the time to improve your skill. And like that is something that I definitely want to try and bring more and more of with the people that I work with. And it is just to try and bring it as a positive experience, because so many people say to me, I can't believe you cook all the time. Like, I don't know how you find the time. And my answer is always, if you really prioritize something, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
I've always prioritized it. Then second, you always value it. And then you start to create whatever way you can a positive experience around it. And that's what I meant by, like, the way it started for me was with music, then with candles. Now I don't need any of them. It's just actually, I mean, I really need to be careful about what I'm saying here, but it's actually making a connection with what you're doing. So
yes, yeah, I resonate completely.
yeah, so it's stopping. Is that cooked? Is the heat correct? Are the flavors blending the way they should? Have I used enough of the right spice? And then time is irrelevant, because you're having a good time, and that's what I want to try and share more of. It's not about throw this in here, get this done and whip it up, and now there's your meal.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot about what I'm doing. But you will lose people at the same time if your cooking demonstrations were 45 minutes long.
It's creativity is what it is. You're bringing something into creation that has not existed before. It's something that you yourself have created. And there's something so rewarding and enjoyable about that experience. I completely 100% resonate, because that's how my relationship is with food right now. And the way I would try and explain that to athletes, now it could be anyone, but to an athlete, is, if you think about it, it's creations within creations of creations. And what I mean by that is, you're out on the field, right? When you're performing, everything you're doing, you're bringing something into creation, like a great move or a great, like, say if it's just, we'll just use Gaelic football. Like when you make an evasion and you lay off the ball or you score, they're forms of creation, right? Think about what supports that mentally, emotionally, physically. When you're in the gym, that's physical creation. When you're at home and you're doing your nutrition and you're cooking a meal that you've learned from Dan, like what he's taught you in terms of nutrients, and now you're putting those together, there's a meal creation that's going to support your sport performance creation, your expression of what you're bringing into creation on the pitch. So it's all these bits of creation that coming together. Like, and just with regards to food, like, I'm exactly like you, man. Like, meals to me now are just, it's not even so much the eating. Like, well, of course it is, but it's the whole, like tonight now when I go home to dinner, like I love it because it's the whole, like it's a whole experience for me. I go home, it's like for me, it's like 7 p.m. Day's done. I go home and it's like, right, iPod in the ears, and it's just me and the meal. And I'm the exact same as you. The spices and the way I pureed the potatoes, the way I did the vegetables in the pot, like. And the one thing I will say is that it can get a little bit dangerous, because if you don't do it just right, you're like, damn, I have to wait till tomorrow now to get that right again.
Mm.
And it can kind of play a little bit with your emotions. So it's obviously a dopamine thing. It's like, this is going to be perfect. Like, needed a little more salt and it would have been just perfect. Because I'm always like, kind of like weighing I was like, that meal was almost there. But when you do nail it, you're like, but I completely agree with you in terms of, the experience. And to me, it's creation, it's creativity. Like, I do think if I wasn't in the profession I'm in now in terms of like, I suppose, like, what do I do now? Like, well, I suppose my original profession was strength and conditioning, and I'm just fascinated with human performance in every aspect, whether it's performance as a parent or CEO or as an athlete. But I have gotten more fascinated with cooking, and I really think it's creation. Like I'm fascinated with musicians because it's creativity. I'm fascinated with artists because it's just creativity, with poets and people in literature. It's just all different forms of creativity that you can appreciate.
Yeah, and I suppose what's also interesting from my perspective is that I've had athletes improve body composition and put the reason down to cooking. You know, they never cooked. Now, of course, we're talking about the science. Where we know they create a calorie deficit and they're hitting their protein. We know that, but the reason, the stimulus, was that they began to cook and appreciate it, and that meant that they were more observant and they were more compliant with everything else.
Yeah, great stuff. So listen, we've spoke about your background, your influences, touched on your philosophy, touched on your principles of how you like to apply your nutritional philosophies. We spoke about habit change, spoke about food hygiene, we spoke to some great things. You know, we spoke about, you know, guys trying to hold on to weight or gain weight and what maybe strategies we might necessarily have to use there, or have a discussion around why certain strategies may need to be put in place. Like the Lucas said, I won't drink that. Would you drink apple juice? Yeah. And you're just like, just wrap it up. Oh yeah, go ahead.
There's actually one thing that I think is really important to all this.
Of course.
And it's actually, and I haven't mentioned it, I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but it's actually the dynamic between people. And one of the reasons why my job is as rewarding as it is because the dynamic between in both teams and in both environments is incredibly open, incredibly open. And nutrition is something that is valued, appreciated, and when somebody tries something, whether it be somebody turns vegan, they're absolutely slated because they're one of the lads, first of all. And it wouldn't matter if they bought a Ferrari or they bought a leather jacket, they're always going to be slated, but they're respected and they're listened to at the same time. And people take a step back and go, you know what? Fair play, fair focus, whatever. Fair play to that athlete. He's trying something to improve himself. And I have facilitated and helped and supported all the way along those things that athletes have wanted to do. But within people's own lives, the dynamics are critical. So whether it be your wife, your husband, your brother, your sister, the encouragement that you give a person, and the support and the experience. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it is very important to be inclusive with with these aspects, whether it be exercise, whether it be the mindful aspect, or whether it be nutrition or food and the food experience. The more people you draw in, the greater the experience.
Real quick, supplements. Okay, I know now. So just to give this a little more preface, we have somebody who's ticking the boxes. You know, energy balance wise. So going back to the principles, energy balance wise, they get it. The macronutrients, they're meeting those needs. The timing, they understand. The quality, you know, they're on board. They're ticking all those big boxes. So basically, they're looking for that extra 2%. What supplements do you think are worth using for? Because your main sort of, now I know you've worked with all types of athletes, but the main sports athletes you're with now are the team-based sports, you know, so Gaelic football and rugby. In terms of performance within those sort of alactic aerobic sports, what sort of supplements do you think are worth using? And if there is any that you do recommend and have used, what would they be?
There's probably only three, and the two are loading, and that's beta alanine and creatine, and the last one is caffeine. So outside of that, I mean, sodium bicarbonate or sodium citrate, there's some evidence for practicalities of it are just it's too messy. But if you use those buffers, and I've used creatine and beta alanine pretty consistently over the past 8 years, and those are and a manipulation of caffeine, but those are the ones that you can say yes, these are offering some advantage.
Do you see protein powder then as a supplement or as a whole food source? Because Eric Helms actually puts that in as a food source, as in like whey.
Well, if I was, I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that. If you see how whey protein is used as a food, and the fact that all it is really is the dried protein and milk, it is. See, you could make the same argument about porridge oats, So
Yeah.
Is ready brec processed or is it whole food? It's sorry, is it a supplement or is it whole food? You can make that kind of argument around any product. It is unquestionably a supplement in our social norms around eating at the moment.
Yeah.
But of course, it's in loads of. I mean, you can find it in ice cream. You can find it in baby food. You can find it in. It has become almost like a whole food ingredient.
Yeah.
Actually, that doesn't make sense. It's not a whole food ingredient, but it's become something that's so commonly consumed now and used that it's just a way of hitting your protein intake.
See, I seen I don't know, it was one of the video interviews you done. You like, you might say on a podcast, if you are using like a whey protein, you do like to put it in like with a whole like a smoothie or something. You like guys take it in that way. Is that just to do with digestibility of it, more better comfort of that going through the system, or what's the rationale there?
It's more to do with behavior. It's more to do with my values around how the people should focus on food and at every opportunity trying to improve the composition of any meal. So I would use the same type of approach when somebody was making porridge in the morning. I would suggest that in order to improve their healthy fat intake, that they use some milled flaxseed and peanut butter. The same way that I'd suggest that someone adds avocado and eggs and different types of high quality olive oil to a salad. It's not any that different.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing about nutrient timing and the different fast releasing amino acid profile of whey. I mean, no interest in that discussion.
Yeah, it's just minutia like that, really, isn't it? It's probably some guy who spends his whole life studying proteins cursing us right now. One last one here for you. Concussions and nutrition, because concussions have become a really big topic within the sports world. Obviously NFL and then the NHL is kind of exploding, and then obviously with rugby, and you're heavily involved in rugby. Do you take any protocols with players who have received head injuries and they've like, this guy had a concussion? Is there any nutritional strategies you use there to help with the brain inflammation and recovery from that, or have you looked into that?
Yes, so there is a protocol, and I believe in absolutely having a protocol, but our evidence, or the evidence in the space of brain injury at this moment in time, is limited. But should you have a protocol? Yes. Do we know for certain that the protocol is having a positive impact? No, but there's enough rationale to say that using something like creatine and fish oil and focusing on, like you mentioned, on the anti-inflammatory nature of high quality foods and avoiding alcohol and things like that may promote good healing. The same way that any other trauma injury should be treated with a specific protein or focusing on anti-inflammatory foods. So I think it's all encompassing in terms of a person's recovery. They rest, they do some light activity, they get sufficient sleep, and then there's an extra focus on specific foods to help promote recovery from the brain injury.
What do you like time wise? Are you okay for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Just these are more fast, rapid questions. Now I say that, and then when I ask them, people go, "These aren't rapid fire rounds. These are thinking questions." First one here for you is just in terms of the biggest lessons you've learned so far in your life. Now I know that could be a big question, but if you were to bring it down, distill it down to one or two or three things max, what would you say have been the biggest things you've learned so far in your life? And they don't just have to be around just your career; they could be any life lesson.
Don't make the one that comes straight to mind is don't make any assumptions. Don't make quick assumptions about anything. And that can be related to science or it can be related to people's personalities. I often tell the story of not knowing somebody well enough and making an assumption about a result that they had, and how badly that affected me. So, no, sorry, how badly that affected my relationship with that person, because I actually didn't fully appreciate what the person had achieved. So it's about don't making any assumption. Fully understand the context before making any quick judgments. And if you don't know the answer to something, don't spoof.
For the international listeners, spoof means don't bullshit.
Yeah, don't bullshit.
I love that. I love the word spoof.
Don't make the mistake of trying to talk about something that you don't know the answer to.
So that reminds me of one of my favorite books, The Four Agreements. That's one of the agreements: never make assumptions. And it also, there's a great story in the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. May he rest in peace for Stephen. Speaking of concussions, that's kind of what he died of. He got a bad head injury cycling. I think then he passed away months after. But in the book, he talks about a guy is on, or he was on a train, and there was a guy there with his 2 kids, and the kids were running havoc. And everyone on the train, they weren't saying, but you could see like everyone was getting really pissed off. So like he was kind of looking around, going, "Is anyone going to say anything to this guy?" So he walks over to the guy and he says, "Sorry, excuse me, sir, but like, your kids are like running." I'm paraphrasing here. He's like, "Your kids are like really annoying everyone. Could you try and control them?" And he was like, the guy was zoned out of it, and like he was like, "Sir, you okay?" And like the guy just basically turns to, "Sorry, what?" And he's like, "Your kids." He goes, "Oh yeah, sorry." Yeah, and then he kept back the guy. He's, "You sure you're okay?" And he goes, Honestly, I just came from the hospital. My wife's just after passing away." So he's like, the kids don't know what to do, and he says, "I don't do it." And then Stephen Covey's like, "And I feel like an asshole because I made an assumption." It just always reminds me of that too.
I actually put in one
Go ahead.
other one that's it's funny how many times you reference your mother's advice. My mother, and I try and actually live by this, and sometimes it's difficult, particularly when you're working in a political environment. And it's I mean, even in Irish culture, it's rampant. But my mother always said, if you don't, I mean, it's such a common cliche thing, but if you have nothing positive to say, if you don't be talking about people, don't. It has saved my bacon.
Oh man, yeah. I resonate. I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
Because there's people out, it'll bite you.
Yeah. To be honest, this may sound a little bit big-headed on my part, but like whenever I was in a room and people were engaging on discussing about someone who wasn't there, like I just wouldn't join in on that. I just always just either leave the room, or if they say, "What do you think?" and I'd be like, "Honestly, guys, I don't know the person that well," that kind of way. And they resent that to a degree. Sometimes you had to affect other relationships. Now, it was kind of a double-edged thing. I know I'm going off for a tangent, but it's a double-edged thing in that they resented that, because really why they resented that was they were like, "Damn it, he's right. I wish I was the person who said that first before he did." Like, because I don't know whatever it was, I don't know, some experience in my life must have gave me that mindset, but I was always wanting to know the why of the why of the why. And we'll completely get back on track here in just a second, but even when it comes to some of the most worst behaviors humans could do, I always wanted to know why. What led that individual? And I'm talking about the worst of the worst. We could name them, but like I was just always fascinated, because my whole thing was that like when a baby is born, they don't know that shit. Like something happened to lead that person to that behavior. And instead of condemning, to be able to step back and ask why, I think is just so crucial. And by the way, like, listen, I'm flawed, and I'm not saying that we don't judge people. Of course you do. You judge people even subconsciously at a subcortical level.
Yeah.
It's to be able to override that initial assessment at a cortical, at a higher brain level, and say, listen, there's a reason why this individual is the way they are, and I'm not going to condemn them for it. I'm going to try and understand it.
And I'm not saying that I haven't said that person is a dickhead for behaving like that.
100%.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I haven't said to another person that, but I like that is completely out of order. But I'm talking about where it's avoidable. That's it.
Well, sorry, and again, just to wrap this little segment up, because I said this on many podcasts and discussions, whether it's on the OPEX podcast or my own one, and in discussions with individuals. This is just something I've evolved to where I am currently right now in my life. Like, I would always say, I have unconditional love for everyone, everything. And when people hear that, like, all right, they might get a little bit, oh, I don't like that term, unconditional love. Another word for it is just acceptance. But where people get mixed up is they think then that I give everyone and everything a free ticket. Do you know what I mean? And that's like, no. The best way of putting it is this. I love everyone, but I don't like everyone.
Yeah.
So what that means is I accept that everything is the way they are for a reason, but that doesn't mean that I have to be around people who I think are a dickhead.
Yeah.
Like so if there's someone over there, as you just alluded to, who is being a dickhead, they are being a hassle, their behavior is not positive to the environment and culture around them.
Exactly.
Like, I'm like, I don't want to be around that individual.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, I understand that there are circumstances and factors, environmental, life experience, that have led that individual to be the person they are currently in this moment in time. And I say that because you can meet that person 5 years down the road and they are a completely different human being. Something could happen to shape them. Yeah. So, I couldn't agree with you more. How do you learn, Dan? What's your learning process?
Great question.
So I'll put a little more context on it. If let's just say there was a topic and you got interested in it and you're like, right, I want to learn as much about this topic. And I'll give you, while you think about it there, what I do, this is just me. I read on it. I usually get a textbook on it and read that. I'll watch, so like, let's say if it's physiology, I'll get the textbook, read a chapter, watch a YouTube video. I'll read another textbook on the same topic, like the same, say it's like cardiovascular system, watch a YouTube. Other thing too is contact experts, perceived experts within the field. And then what I like to do after I read something is I usually like to make a presentation on it. So teaching something to me is consolidation. So learn it and then make it. It's this thing of creativity again. I created something with it now and made it my own to consolidate it in my own knowledge.
I actually I don't have anything really to add. I mean, the first thing I was going to say is that my network and the people who I have good relationships with, I'll contact immediately to see if they have an opinion on it.
Brendan.
Yeah, Brendan first. And then, I mean, the stuff that he's no interest in, that we're very, very, very different. Very, very, very different people. And here's a little insight. I don't think I've ever shared this insight. I think it's probably relevant a lot more when you're younger. Because of how impressive and because of how knowledgeable and because of the experience and because of the vision he had, it took me a longer period of time to be sure about my own. Yeah. And that was tricky. That was tricky because when you leave so much value on another person's opinion, it limits your own mistakes and it limits your own road that you take. And then it took me a while to realize nothing wrong with my own road, and that it's nothing to do with him. It was always me. It's nothing to do with him. But once I realized that I had my own, direction of what I wanted to do, and I'm talking about the way that I educate, the way that I learn myself, all of those aspects, then the relationship is one that can really flourish because you've got something that's valuable, a valuable experience that you're bouncing off, and you can get an insight. It doesn't mean that you take that opinion or advice, but that's a really important life lesson that I've learned. How I even got onto that, but that's.
I think we'll call this episode the Brendan Egan Love Hour.
No.
Yeah, he'll be sending us emails going, lads, seriously, did you have to mention me so many times? But one thing I will say about Brendan is that like he has such principle, like principles based approach when it comes to critical thinking. That's why you can converse with him on so many different topics, because he's so good at peeling things back and critically thinking. You know what I mean? And again, he does it in such like a. Just like the best way to put it, such a decent way to, because he's such a great manner about him. But yeah, he's a great sounding board.
I'll add actually something very important that I did learn as well, and it was my uncle Ronald, who was he's a very, 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 very bright man. I'm not going to say he retired at the age of 40 because what he did was become a full-time parent, but he worked in Silicon Valley, and he started off as like he started off in aviation, got the job like over way more qualified people because of his relationship skills and his ability to.
Thoughts about?
But anyway, he always told me. He said, "There's people within your environment that you're going to meet and that you're going to come in contact with." And he said, you'll recognize them very quickly. There'll be something that's slightly different about the way that they engage in their environment. And he said, they will be high achievers, but there'll be something very distinct about them. And he said, what you need to do is you need to recognize what's very positive about what they're doing and how they're paving their way, or how they're, in his words, it was going up the ladder, because he worked in the business world. And he said, what you need to get into is their jet stream. And he said, learn from them, pick up what you need to know or what they do well, and apply it to your own practice. And that was incredibly effective. So when I stepped into both team sport environments, I recognized them like that. It all made such sense. It was athletes. It was the Johnny Sextons and the Brian O'Driscolls. It was the Leo Collins, and it was like the Martin Kennedy that I talked about. Brendan. It was Jim Gavin. It was all of these people, and you start going, "Oh my God! Like these are all brilliant human beings, and I can learn from them all."
Yeah.
So each, like this, I mean, even the stuff that I see Stuart Lancaster and how he educates, it's all transferable, but you have to be able to see what they're doing and then go, do you know what? There's so many ways that I can use that coaching method in what I'm doing. It could be a line out. It could be some move that they're using, and you're going, that's really interesting. I could apply that to something in my education, in my in my presentations.
So to answer that question, how you learn, your network is a massive part of it.
Massive part of it.
Yeah. Great stuff. Now, I've made a joke about this the other day as well. If Andy Galpin heard this, he'll shoot me because he hates this question. I heard him being asked this question on the Mind Muscle Project, and he goes, "I hate this question," but I like it, so I'm still going to ask it. Is there anything you do on a daily basis that's essential to your day? And the reason Andy doesn't like it, he thinks that if you have to rely on something, it's you're not adaptable. That your day's ruined if you don't have this one thing, which I think is a little bit severe.
And like, I think that that's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And the reason I think it's brilliant is because I've actually considered putting this out there because of how much value it's brought to my life. And it's a number of small things. It's the behavior one. It's when you get up, you make your bed. And my bed is always made. So, and it's not a big thing. It's just that it's not messy. So my bed is made. I have a pillow, an orthopedic pillow, that has been life-changing in terms of sleep quality.
Wow.
Oh, that has been, I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. My girlfriend introduced me to, and this is debatable, but has definitely been real positive. I can't, like, it's, you're going to go, what? But she wears Factor 50 on her face every day. And that has been like one of these positive behavioral changes that I've made. I floss every day. And then I got the question from Danny about what would be the thing that I'd recommend people to do the most, and that is just
cook their meal.
Yeah, but don't think about cooking your dinner for an hour. Think about change it to prepare one meal and do it consistently, and that has so many knock-on. Like, I have so many athletes come to me and said, "You know what? That was great. That has been a big game changer."
So that's why that resonated. See how I remember these things in that podcast. I love that podcast with Danny, because somebody, I was like nodding my head going, yeah. Because again, my evening meal, it's that experience. Like, it just brings me so much joy. Like, man, if you think about it, because people have been asking me lately, not lately, sorry, everyone asks us, like, how you doing? How you doing? And like, my standard answer lately, and it's a little bit of tongue in cheek, but it's serious as well. Like people always go, how you doing? I'm like, I'm from a first world country. I live in a first world country, and if you really want to get to all the ace cards, like, and I don't mean this in a like, to me, every human being is as special as everyone else. But like, I'm white, I'm male, from Ireland. Like, I got all the advantages from the get go. Like, I couldn't be any more grateful. So like, when I'm at home cooking my dinner in my little apartment, I'm like, my life is a miracle. Like, I hit. So just, and that evening meal just reminds that every night. So I have whole experience around it. If you've anything to add there, you can. Sorry, I'll cook on in at the end there.
No, I think what you need to share within that, because I've pushed people really, really, really hard on this, and that is identifying what led you to create value on something, because that's what I feel like. An awful lot of it is.
That's a great question.
Yeah, because I feel like an awful lot of it is me sharing my own experience, and that has been a big benefiting factor. Because if you say something convincingly enough, then people will buy it. Like, I'll never. Again, I feel like I've shared an awful lot more than I would. I mean, I don't even know who's going to listen to this, but geez, one of the biggest mistakes I made was actually very recently. It was in the past year, and it was in a big presentation. And the mistake I made was not preparation. I'm always really well prepared. My mistake was I took a big risk in something that I was going to say, and I didn't commit to it.
Mm.
And it burnt me. Like, I lost the group in front of me because I didn't commit to it. I did exactly the same concept very soon after, and I said, I'll never let that happen again. I'll never not commit to it. And like, the response was overwhelmingly positive. So,
but instead of seeing that as a mistake, though, really that was a growth opportunity, and you grew from it.
I know, but the learning element is the commitment to something. That's what I'm saying.
I know.
So you have to feel that pain in order to learn from it. But like, there's certain things that I always say to some of the practitioners or the other nutritionists that I'm working with, is that I'd rather that there's a lot of these things they don't have to go through. That they can actually just commit to something or take a risk on something, and that help them along the way a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because who was I speaking with the other day? I said this to them. It'll come to my mind. But I was, Dan Baker. Sorry, excuse me. How could I forget? I was speaking to Dan Baker. I did the podcast with Dan Baker. And I know Dan well because he's a lecturer on my master's, and he's an absolute legend as well. But just in terms of what you touched on there, in terms of like, that sometimes, you kind of want to, maybe you have to save the younger generation from some of the mistakes, but at the same time, they still need to go through some of those lessons for their own growth. They need a little bit of adversity. And the story I love is Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm sure you're aware who he is. The astrophysicist. He was on London Real one time, and like, one of the standard questions that Brian Rose from the Real asked, like, if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old you, like, what would you have told them? And some people some similar questions are like, what's your biggest regret? It's kind of similar to that, like, and my answer is the exact same as deGrasse Tyson's. Like, so I was asked a few times, like, what would you change in life? And I always like, nothing, because like, everything that's happened, you've meant to go through. It's been an experience to lead you to the person who you are in this moment in time. But Brian Rose asked deGrasse Tyson, like, I'm going somewhere with this, by the way, just on what you touched on, just in case, where is he going with this? But deGrasse Tyson was like, he says, I wouldn't tell 20-year-old Neil anything, because, like, again, every experience that I've had in my life has led me to be the person I am right now in this interview with you, Brian. And I'm paraphrasing the exact same, but that was the premise. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson gives this great example. He says, right, the immigrants that came to America from Europe came over broke, penniless, and he's like, treated like crap. and then they had to work their way up. And he says, and you got a few of those immigrants who became entrepreneurs and opened businesses and became really successful just through sheer hard work, will, determination. And they had this thing like, I want to give my kids everything. I never want them to suffer like we did. And then when they have kids, their kids grow up to be ungrateful little assholes. And then the parents are like, where did we go wrong? And the Grass Tyson's like, do you not see? Like, what made you the people you are was the adversity and the grind and the learning and the appreciation. But you just handed that to the kids. So they didn't have any of that context. They didn't have adversity to grow their character. So it is that fine balance of like, find a mentor so they can save you some hard lessons. But it's kind of like, you still need to go through so much shit, so you do.
No, I agree. That's very true. And just to add to that, I always say that it was cleaning sheds and the horrible jobs that I did as a kid that actually built my work ethic. So yeah,
big time, man. Last three for you. What is your top book recommendation, and what are you currently reading, if you are?
I really enjoyed The Power of Habit. That was a really enjoyable book. But I think the book that has influenced me most in recent times is Above the Line. I'm actually using it as a reference point for behaviors. So it's
who's that by?
Urban Meyer, I think his name is.
It'll be in the show notes. Above the Line.
Above the Line, yeah. It's a very good book.
I've read Power of Habit, all right, but Above the Line, no, I haven't.
Above the Line, yeah, it's Urban Meyer, and it's about a coach who builds culture in the college football team, and he talks about his experience. Not even that long, but it's a very powerful book.
Great.
And like I had so many moments where I was smiling because of things that I would have experienced. But he talks about it in very tangible ways of how you achieve changes in culture within teams.
And what are you currently reading right now, or is that your current?
What am I currently reading right now? Just finished the Matthew Walker one, which was actually
Why We Sleep.
Why We Sleep.
Yeah, I read that last summer. It's a good book, actually. And I have to say, like, when I got it, I was like, I'd read so much in sleep. I was kind of like, what am I going to take from this? And there still was some very good things in it. His research around, like, the brain is huge, like, well, Alzheimer's and stuff like that. So that's massive.
I'm not finished it yet. I'm currently reading 12 Rules of Life, an Antidote to Chaos. Jordan B. Peterson, and I've enjoyed the first number of chapters.
Yeah, that everyone's reading that book, or what when it came out first.
Oh
yeah, Jordan Peterson's huge, man. Sure,
right. Okay.
He's always on Rogue, and everyone knows about him. Sure, he's on the all meat diet. You know that, Jordan Peterson.
No, and to be honest with you, when you say about books, I don't even know where I just start reading books, and I don't tend to talk an awful lot about the books I'm reading. That's why I wouldn't even know that.
Oh yeah. It's like, even when I meet strangers, like, if I meet someone in the gym, it's like, what do you read? I always get fascinated when people go, I don't really read. You don't read?
Yeah.
Out of your mind.
Yeah, I know.
The lessons, the bar, you don't even need to pay for them. Just go to your library, just there.
No.
Okay, last two. You got a one-way ticket on the Starship Enterprise, and so you're leaving Earth forever. You've only 1 year left. So you get your ticket and they say, listen, in 365 days, we're getting on Starship Enterprise and we're gone forever. We can't go back to Earth. So you've only 1 year left on planet Earth. How would you spend that year and why?
Well, maybe this is the answer that you get all the time, but I have done, I'm very privileged to have done a bit of traveling, in the sense that, I haven't gone away and done 2 years away and been all around the world.
Yeah.
But I'm not a home bird, absolutely not a home bird, but I absolutely love home. I love home, and I always try and improve home as much as I possibly can. Going and visiting my parents, and I have a small 40-acre farm, and I'm always trying to build a fence or that. So I take great pride in it, and I would try and leave as best I possibly can. I would try and leave my home and my family and my friends in a better place, whatever that would be. I would throw in an old trip to the I always wanted to see the icebergs in the South Pole. So
Wow.
I do that trip as well. That is supposed to be absolutely mind blowing.
Can I ask, would that have been your answer when you were 10 years younger? Like
Yes.
to spend time with your family?
Oh no 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 no, definitely not, definitely not. It's only it's only when you realize, like I said when I started this, when you asked me about the influencing question, the question about influence, it's only been in the past 2 years
Yeah.
that I've realized the impact that my grandmother had with me, getting me to pick the eggs up in the hen house, and the fact that we had a garden that they cut the cabbage off and dig in the potatoes, all of that. That's only very recently that I've made all of those connections. So when you look at what really matters and where the value comes from, you realize it's in your family and in your friends.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that is it's funny. I just again resonate so much your answer there in that like it's only within the last probably 18 months that I probably would say I've tried and spend more time with family as well. Like, whereas when I was younger, I was like, fucking family, not a chance. It's as you get older too, you start to appreciate some of the sacrifices they made for you because you were kind of just too young to kind of realize what was going on in the background. I get at it, one of the funny things just before I answer the final question is that I have friends now, like, because I'm 32, so I have a lot of friends now who are getting married or are married and they have houses and they have kids. And I was just like, geez, like, how much does like a house and family and kids cost? And then I started thinking to myself one day, how much have I cost my parents? And I swear to God, right, when I got to 100,000 euro, I stopped. So I sat down and go, right, nappies, school books, just estimating. I was like, holidays, clothes, Christmas. And I was like, shit, this is adding up food. I was like, that's a lot of food. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, I really should appreciate what they've done. So, big time. All right, I'm taking you for dinner. And sure, you're only around the corner, not too far away. But I'm taking you for dinner. And your partner, are you married?
No, I'm girlfriend.
Girlfriends, yeah. So your girlfriend doesn't count. She's coming. You two are the one ticket. So, but I say to you, Danny, you can bring 5 people to this dinner. They can be dead or alive. They can be real or fictitious character. Who would you bring to this dinner, and why would you invite those people? That's the very last question.
I grew up and I thought the people who I wanted to get to know was Roy Keane and like I loved what Blur, Garth Brooks, and these. I mean, I was a very much a fan. And what you realize, and I suppose I feel very privileged to say this, that some of the elite athletes that I work with have become my friends. They have absolutely become my friends. But the people who are the closest to you and the people who you spend your time with, they're the people that you want to have dinner with. I mean, I have no interest in speaking to Barack Obama about politics or any of that. I have no interest in these famous athletes. So it's my sister, and she's a great woman and has been the person who I get so much of my advice from. It's Brendan, and it's my closest friends. I'm not going to name them out, but those
Yeah,
are the
yeah,
people
that's great.
who I would sit down with and have an absolutely incredible night.
Man, I love it. And you know what? The more people I interview, the more that answer is coming back.
Mm.
Dr. Ben House was the first person that said it. And I remember, bit like Andy Gallup, the way Andy hated that question I mentioned earlier on. Like, but Ben House is saying, he's like, I hear all these people, I'm all these famous people. He goes, do you know who I want to go to dinner with? My dad, my wife, my family, like people who actually give a shit about me. So,
Yeah.
listen, I love it. Come here, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about you? And also finish in on FoodFlicker. What's all that crack about?
Well, I'm very, very, very excited for the first time about it. It is like I don't suffer from any mental health problems, but my vision is something that has caused me an awful lot of pain. I started out with um, no, not pain, an awful lot of frustration
Hmm.
because I've invested thousands and thousands of hours into FoodFlicker, and I didn't know what it was. I knew people liked seeing meals and ideas and my information, but I mean, I couldn't do that for a living. I mean, that's not possible because people are not. I'm not getting any money from it. So when people were saying, "Oh, it's going so well," and I'm going, "How's it going well?" I'm putting out all this information and people like it, but I'm not getting anything for it. I mean, of course, I'm doing it because people like it and I'm helping people, but
Yeah.
that's the driver. But I have now. I'm very, very close to launching a new recipe website,
Great.
and I'm very close to also launching a recipe book. So I'm
Wow.
very, very excited about the what what people will think of both. And I have a business concept around something that I believe for the first time of anything that I've done that I feel I have no problem in selling something. And that was always my problem. I never knew what the hell I was going to sell. But now I'm very comfortable with selling what I'm about to sell.
Well done, Dan. Congratulations. I truly mean that. That's it's great to hear because, I mean, the amount of work that goes into creative processes like that is immense. So fair play to you.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you if they just want to connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a LinkedIn and then just Daniel Davey on that. I have a website which is about to go live, and that's going to be daveynutrition.com.
Brilliant.
And FoodFlicker will be rebranded under Davey Nutrition. But at the moment, you can see me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram and at FoodFlicker.
Great. That'll be all linked up in the show notes for anyone who is currently occupied, like driving. Don't go on your phone and drive at the same time. That's not good. We don't promote that here. Listen again, then. Truly appreciate it. I'll say goodbye to you offline. But for everyone else listening, you're spoiled, rotten people with all this great information. But until next time, peace.